Okay, welcome to the Zonos webinar on the new UK Vat scheme. So we had a little bit of a technical difficulty at the beginning. One of our team members, we were having a hard time getting her in, and so she's Michelle was going to be the moderator, which I will be taking over those duties for just a little bit here, and introduce Aaron Bezant and what we're going to be going through today around the UK Vat. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind actually just going to the next slide, and then I'll pass things over to you in just a minute. So Aaron, who I've known now for close to 8-9 years. Prior to coming over at Zonos, he was the working over at Rocky Mountain ATV, and they're one of the largest online providers of like ATV parts, accessories, tires, riding gear. And for his over 12 years there, he oversaw multiple different e-commerce distribution facilities, managed a massive team, and was the one in charge of negotiating freight contracts, things like that. So he's very, very familiar with what e-commerce retailers are going through when they're trying to export. And then specifically, he was also over helping them expand their global footprint in which they use Zonos. So hopefully the appeal of Southern Utah is what brought Aaron down here to join our team, which has been, we've been lucky to have him. So real quick, before I pass it over to him, I think for those that have known us, our mantra is kind of, it's to code cross-border. And Aaron he oversees the team now here at Zonos that does that. He's the head of our global trade. And our decoder team is the one that is tasked with making what is really complex as simple as possible. And we really believe that cross-border is is facing a major technology problem, and it is not a shipping problem. It really needs to be tackled from getting the technology right to allow companies to export and sell and be able to sell their goods internationally. So Aaron oversees a lot of what we've done with our APIs, especially surrounding our landed costs and our classification API, our denied party screening, all of those kind of things, him and the team. And then we've been busy over the past year, adding a lot of team members with a lot of growth. And over the past month or two, really spending a lot of time around this UK Vat scheme and trying to figure out what's the best approach that we can make it really clear for what customers need to do, and then how we can help them. So I won't go on much longer. Oh, I didn't even introduce myself, I guess, but I think Michelle was going to introduce me. But I'm Clint Reed. I'm the founded the company back in CEO and founded the company back in right around 2010, and it's been a fun ride and pretty, tackling some pretty hard problems. But we're excited to continue to tackle problems, and hopefully cross-border doesn't get harder. Hopefully we get to make it easier. And Aaron, why don't I pass things over to you to take it from here? And I think you can submit questions, and I'll try to moderate that during the meeting. And then there might be some Q&A, so I'll kind of get with the team and make sure that I'm doing that right during the webinar.
Awesome, thanks, Clint. Yeah, there is the opportunity to submit Q&A kind of throughout, and we'll have some time at the end. We should be able to have some time to work through those. And quite honestly, if we don't go the full hour, as long as we're covering everything we need to and answering your questions, I don't think anyone here complains about getting done with the meeting early, moving on to the next thing. But at the same time, we've got the full hour here that we can use to make sure we get everybody's questions answered, to make everyone feeling comfortable about what the subject matter is that we'll be talking about today. So thanks for everyone attending. We've got a great response to this webinar. I hope everyone's staying safe during this holiday season. And when it comes to 2020, this has been a tumultuous year for everyone. It's been a lot of interesting new things I think we've all learned on how to, whether it be ordering food using your app on your phone versus walking in versus a number of different things that we've all had to deal with this year. So it's been difficult, and I guess it's only fitting for a year like this to have to deal with one of the most disruptive global e-commerce changes that likely we've ever seen. Let's top the year off right with dealing with that. So that's what we're here about today. So my hope, I've been to some webinars, plenty of webinars over the years, and I can tell you my honest feedback on most webinars is I leave them a little more confused or bored by the end of it. I hope it's not that way today. I'm hoping this can be insightful and useful. I've attended some on Brexit in the UK, and I feel like I leave with a bunch of legal jargon and mumbo jumbo that I don't know what to do with it. And only a small percentage of it was actually applicable for me. So my goal here is we're going to be hyper-focused on one aspect of Brexit. We're not going to go into everything else. I want to keep this hyper-focused on cross-border going into the UK. So that's basically anyone in the world selling into the UK. That includes the EU selling into the UK at the start of the year. And what this new law change means for you, and then some practical ways that you can go about complying with this new law. And so, like Clint mentioned, I like to break things down and try to, find simple solutions to complex problems. And so that's what the hope is here today. And so, without further ado, let's jump into this here. So, the agenda you can see in front of you, we're going to kind of just walk through the law itself, why they have it, who's impacted, what the changes are, how to collect VAT, what kind of things you need to say to your customers afterwards, the registration or remittance process. We'll touch on that a little bit. And then really at the end, this is where you need to stay tuned. Don't tune out too quickly on this. At the end, we'll talk through some really practical solutions and give you kind of some bullet point lists of things you need to do to be able to tackle this new law. So, and again, we'll also wrap up. I know we've got a number of Zonos customers on this call as well. We'll wrap up some Zonos specific things to let you know how we're here to help you. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A after that. So let's talk a little bit about this new UK law. But before we dive too deeply into the UK, it's worth prefacing all of that with the history of e-commerce in general, and when it comes to these types of tax laws. You can thank Australia for starting this whole snowball effect that we're seeing with countries coming up with laws like this. Australia was unique, and it was something that was in the works for years, where they had a very high threshold for allowing duties and or product coming into their country to be duty and tax free. So they had a limit of 1,000 Australian dollars, which if you break it down to US dollars, last I looked, it fluctuates between $600 and $800 typically, but they would allow anything under 1,000 Australian dollars to come in duty and tax free. And that worked great historically because global e-commerce was not that big of a deal. Most shipments were high value shipments, commercial shipments coming in. That $1,000 threshold was no big deal. But then with the growth of global e-commerce, Australia saw a couple of problems. Obviously, lost revenue being one, but then the domestic businesses were feeling like they were operating at a disadvantage to global retailers because they're in Australia having to collect GST, and then the global businesses can send everything in duty and tax free. And so the Australian government was trying to find solutions and creative solutions to overcome some of those problems. But just simply snapping your fingers and saying, hey, let's just collect duty and tax on more orders coming across the border is complex and labor intensive to be able to do that. And so they actually came up with, quite frankly, in their eyes, a brilliant solution to this problem, to be able to collect revenue, put their businesses on a more level playing field with the global businesses. And that's where they started putting the burden of collecting GST on more companies than just Australian businesses. Now it's on anybody outside of Australia that wants to sell goods direct to consumer in Australia will now needs to collect and remit GST directly to Australia. So now it's on the online retailers. Well, some of you are saying, well, I'm not doing that today. One thing they put in place for that is they said, but we're only going to make this impact larger sellers into Australia. So they put a threshold that says if it's over 75,000 Australian dollars, if you're selling more than 75,000 Australian dollars in a year, then you're going to be required to collect and remit GST direct to the Australian government. If you're under that, law doesn't apply. So it kind of gave a pass to all of the smaller retailers that are selling into Australia. So fast forward, how did that go? It went great. And now all of a sudden you have New Zealand copying them. You had Norway coming up with their own scheme. And by the way, they all come up with the same concept and same objective, but they all do it in different ways. Switzerland has a scheme. Indonesia has something. But really, just like Australia, most of these don't impact a lot of small businesses. They're really impacting the larger sellers going into these countries. So the UK is rolling out their own law on this. And they do it a little differently, and I'm going to dive into more details here in a second. But essentially, I kind of talked through the why they're doing it, same kind of reasons as Australia. And how they're doing it is they're defining, these lower value e-commerce orders that are under 135 British pounds are the ones that need to have VAT collected and remitted on them. So let's dive into this in a little more detail on if this impacts you or not. This impacts you if you are a business or a marketplace with UK cart totals under 135 pounds. And I don't know if you noticed on here, but there is nothing that talks about a threshold of how much sales you have to have in the UK in order for this law to apply to you. Essentially, if you are selling any low value orders, which is termed as anything under 135 British pounds, for all the Americans on the call, that's essentially 180 US dollars. If you have orders going into the UK under that and you want to continue fulfilling those orders to the UK under that value, then this law impacts you. Even if you have one order in a year, you have to collect and remit on that. So this is what you'll have to do is you collect the 20% VAT on those. You register for your VAT number with HMRC, which is Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, is what that stands for. And then you remit quarterly all of the VAT you collected on those low value orders. So that's the law in a nutshell, and we'll dive into this in more detail. And then just a side note on this is EU to UK and UK to EU is now considered a cross-border transaction. And so this law will be impacting anyone from the EU selling into the UK as well. So let's break this down in a little more detail now. To start with, let's actually talk about what's happening today, and then we'll talk a little bit about the changes and how they look transitioning from 2020 to 2021. So currently, you're shipping goods into the UK, it gets to customs. Customs will review the shipment. If it's under 15 British pounds, they say it's not worth bothering on collecting duty and tax on this. It's below the duty and VAT threshold. It goes through and delivers to your customers, no problem. If your order is valued between 15 and 135 pounds, they won't bother collecting duty, but customs will collect VAT upon import, and that will typically be billed along with fees and things like that to your customers upon delivery. Or you also have the option to use some services with carriers to have those billed back to you, but it's really all facilitated by customs upon import. And then sales over 135 pounds right now, customs is going to assess duty as well as VAT, same kind of collection mechanism as I just spoke about. Moving on to what will be starting on January 1st is they say, you know what, anything over 135, let's keep it the same as it is today. Anything under 135, we're going to put the burden on the online retailer. That could be the business and seller or marketplace, whatever it is that's facilitating the sell. We want you to collect on those low value orders. So at customs, we're not going to worry about it. And so to go into that 2021 rule in a little more detail, if you're under 135 British pounds, they call that supply VAT. customs will no longer be collecting anything on those shipments that are over as they come through, because they're saying, hey, this is now on the marketplace or the online retailer to collect this at the time of checkout, and they will be remitting it to HMRC directly. So now as it's crossing the border, they're not going to worry about it. And the 20% VAT that needs to be charged needs to be on the shipping, on the product, as well as the shipping and insurance. So it's important to note here that with these 2 bullet points, you determine if it's under the 135-pound threshold by only looking at the product value. But when you go to charge VAT, you are charging VAT on both the product as well as any shipping and insurance that is charged to the customer. So orders over 135 pounds will be basically business as usual, like it is today. It's not on you as the retailer or marketplace to collect. It'll be on customs to collect and assess and collect that, whether it be upon delivery or through billing services that the carriers offer. One thing to know, I don't think it affects a lot of you, but on the orders under 135 pounds, there's a few exceptions like that really isn't applicable here, like on a consumer to consumer shipments, grandma sending something to her son, that, grandma's not required to register for VAT. Customs will take care of that. Anything that's subject to things like excise duties, these thresholds, these de minimis thresholds that they have that customs looks at, there's certain products where they say, we don't care what the value is, we're going to assess duty and taxes on those. Typically in most countries, it's things like alcohol, tobacco, and so on. But if you have products that are subject to any of those going into the UK, I'm not going to go into that in detail, but those are the types of products that customs will actually be taking care of upon import. So you want to do a little more research into exactly what your procedures would be if you're required to register or not for those products. So let's put a little note in here about the customer experience. If you look, if you kind of take a step back and look at what your customers' experience is when they're shopping on your website, it's sometimes hard. It's sometimes easy to get sucked into, oh my gosh, how do I apply? How do I comply with this law? What do I have to do? What's my experience with this? But you need to take a step back as well to make sure you're creating as seamless and positive a shopping experience as you can for your customers. So if you notice here, you have to be collecting VAT for your orders under 135 pounds. So your customer, if you're registered and collecting VAT, and a customer now adds more to their cart to where they're over 135 pounds, you have a decision to make. What do you do? Now that's no longer being required to be collected or remitted by you. Customs will be taking care of that. Your options there will be, well, I'll just stop collecting VAT on those higher value orders, and now I'll allow that to be collected upon delivery. Or you can use the billing services that many carriers have to be able to say, you know what, I'm still going to continue collecting VAT, and I'll also collect VAT and duty on those higher value orders. And then I will have the carrier bill me back for those. So that way my customers' experience is smooth. They're not having any surprises upon delivery. That's a big part of our business. That's our recommendation to create the best customer experience. But that's a decision you'll have to make, is how you want to handle those higher value orders as far as your customer shopping experience is concerned. So now as far as collecting VAT, I talked on this a little bit already. As far as the VAT you collect is applied to both the cart total and the shipping and insurance costs. The other thing to keep in mind is, to comply with this, I keep talking about 135 British pounds, but you've got to have a way to understand if you are above, if a particular order is above or below 135 pounds. So, and that changes, right? It's not a static $180.53 every day. And quite frankly, that was, I think, put in there yesterday, so it's probably different today. So you'll need a mechanism to understand current currency conversion rates to be able to determine if an order is below and needs to be, and you're required to collect VAT and remit on it, or if the order is above 135 and is the burden for customs to be able to do that. So here at Zonos, we do have live exchange rates that we're monitoring for our customers. There are some tools, if you're not a Zonos customer, you can tie into to be able to help us, that we can help you with this if needed. So now you've got all that figured out. Your customer's gone through, they placed their order. Now there's another requirement where you need to give your customers a compliant VAT invoice. Honestly, it's a receipt. There's a lot of big words here, but this is really your order confirmation email, your invoice to your customers. It's their receipt to say, oh, I bought my overpriced pair of whatever it is from this retailer for this amount, and this is how much VAT I paid on it, and it lists your VAT ID number. In a nutshell, that's what that is. There are some requirements around what a compliant one is, and why this matters is there are some, let's say it's a UK business that buys from you, and they can reclaim the VAT that they paid to you, but they need an official receipt from you that has their VAT ID number on it. And so the thing about this is you will only be required to supply the invoice for orders that are below the 135, or orders that you're going to be remitting on. Anything that's being collected by customs, you do not supply a VAT invoice for them. And there's a few different invoices here. There's a simplified invoice, a modified invoice, and a full invoice. As you can see, the simplified invoice is for low value orders under 250 pounds. That works for your low value orders to the UK, because they're all going to be under 135 anyways. If you have high value orders and for some reason you've got a special arrangement, you're using your VAT number for high value orders, that modified one will come into play, but I'm not going to talk to that because that's probably not the case for the people on this call. And then a full invoice is really just their standard full invoice that can be applied to, for any value order that's out there. I won't go into these in too much detail, but this is kind of the checklist that you have here. The modified invoice, I'm just going to ignore that on the right. And if you kind of go down through the full invoice, this is just taking your standard invoice and adding some information to it. You're going to have most likely you're going to have a unique invoice number on your invoices. Your business name and address is going to be on there. That number, that's new, right? That's something that you don't have historically, but that's something that would have to be added. The date information about the sale, your customer's name. It's actually not even required for the simplified invoice, but you know what, your invoice probably already has it. So nope, leave it on there if it's already on there. Description of the goods that you're selling to them. And then really the difference between the full and simplified invoice comes down to how detailed and how granular you get with the breakdown of the VAT that you collected and are remitting to Her Majesty. So this is, you can see the simplified one is basically, in a nutshell, it says at the bottom, those bottom two lines, you tell them what rate you charge VAT at, 20% in most cases, and then you can list the total amount of your sale that includes VAT, and then they can do some backwards math on that to be able to go and reclaim VAT if they need to, or figure out how much VAT they've paid. So whereas the full invoice just gives a detailed breakdown on this. Is there one better than the other? No, as long as they're compliant, you're good. And quite frankly, it's just pick the one that is easiest for you guys to supply to your customers. So as far as a few questions around these invoices, get into the nitty gritty, you kind of talk high level on some of these things. And now the question is, when you start putting this into practice, it's like, oh no, do I have to send a paper invoice, or how do I get it to them? It doesn't matter. If you want to use a fax machine, if you still have one, kicking around collecting dust, use a fax machine. But really, it's 2020. Emailing them their invoice is going to be the most common and simplest process. That's what we're doing for our customers. That would be the recommended way to go, unless you feel like there's another process that works better for you. They just need something in either paper or digital form. How long do you have to issue a VAT invoice? Typically 30 days. On the next slide, I'll talk to kind of something that may stretch that a little bit, especially currently. And then does the invoice need to be in English or pound sterling? Honestly, language and currency doesn't matter. Just keep it in whatever's easy for you. It doesn't matter if it's in USD or Australian dollars or whatever currency that your invoices are in now. If it's easy to keep it in that, just keep it in that. So let's move on to the one more question on invoices, which is, what if you haven't gotten your VAT ID number yet? Well, this is going to happen for probably a good majority of the people that are trying to register. I imagine HMRC is completely overwhelmed with applications right now, and there is a time period that takes place. Normally, you get everything together, lots of information they ask for, you submit it, it might take a couple weeks. There's a good chance it's going to take even longer now, as they're getting inundated with everybody trying to get ready. So you may not have your VAT ID come January 1st. What do? Well, HMRC gives you a really confusing response to this. They say you can't charge or show VAT on your invoice until you get your VAT number. However, you still have to pay the VAT to HMRC. Well, they're not saying don't collect it. They're trying to be super technical, but don't give them an official invoice until you have a VAT number. And they give a silly recommendation, since they probably haven't worked in e-commerce much, but they tell you, they give you some, maybe you can increase the prices and allow for this, and try to tell your customers about it and create this really confusing experience. I've talked to some tax agents from the UK that are experts in this stuff, and their recommendation is, look, just you can send them, what you could do is a couple of different options. You could send them an initial one that says your VAT number is pending, and then reissue the VAT invoice later with the full VAT ID on it once you get it. As simple as that. Or if you need to, you can kind of decide what you do at the time of sell on how you message them, but you don't necessarily need to overhaul your whole processes. Just get them an invoice, let them know your VAT ID is pending, and then reissue the full invoice with your VAT ID number once it becomes available. And it's possible that might be past that 30-day window, but there's really not much you can do about it. You just need to do your best to comply and use as much reasonable care as you can to comply, and you should be fine. So let's talk a little bit about registration. I will not go into this in great detail, but if you want to get registered, it's online with HMRC. You see the link at the top. Really, it comes down to, you set up an account. This is where you go through the registration process. They ask for all sorts of information. It's not a simplified process. If you look at Australia and some of the other ones, they came up with a lightweight, simplified process to make it easy for companies in other countries to register and give them money. Makes sense, right? I mean, the money's flowing one way there. You'd think a simplified process makes a lot of sense. The UK hasn't done that. So they do ask for a lot of information. It's an intensive process in that regard. So get started now if you're planning on doing it. You set up an online account, start working through the process, following the prompts, answering the questions, and you'll eventually get through it. So once you have that, then you can manage your VAT remittance every quarter. One thing to keep in mind is that their deadlines, not everyone has the same quarterly remittance schedule. They will give you your own custom schedule that keeps a steady cash flow coming into HMRC. And so once you get your VAT ID number, they'll also tell you what your payment deadlines are, what your quarterly remittance schedule will be. So, and then that's also where you'll go in and pay to HMRC electronically the VAT that you've been collecting for the previous time period. One other thing with this that's worth talking about is the new VAT scheme is only required for orders that are placed in 2021. What I'm talking about is the transition from 2020 to 2021. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, do I base this on when the package arrives in the UK? What if I ship in December and it lands there in January? What if my order is placed in December, but I don't ship it till after the holidays and into the new year? They've given guidance on this. It is just about when the order was placed. There's a little bit of a messy transition there, but they're saying, hey, if the order's placed in December and you ship it in January, consider it a 2020 sale. You're not required to remit on those orders. So really everyone's in different time zones and stuff. Just do what works for you and your systems to set it. Hey, my definition of 2020 sell is by December 31st in whatever time zone you're in, and you're good to go. So that's kind of how that transition would work. Again, based on whenever the order is placed, not necessarily when it ships or arrives in the UK. So that is wrapping up registration. Now, just to kind of wrap this all up in a nutshell, as far as your options going forward, well, the options, the first and obvious option is, hey, I'm going to just register for HMRC. I'm going to start collecting all my low value orders under 135 pounds, and I'll be remitting that quarterly. Your checklist of things to do, if this is the plan of what you want to do, is get your registration going now. And then make sure you have a mechanism in place to watch those currency conversion rates and understand if an order is above or below the 135 pound threshold, so you know who's responsible, if it's you or if it's UK Customs. And then you start collecting VAT and all those low value cart totals. And then once those orders come in, you remit or you send your customers a compliant VAT invoice only on those low value orders. And then you remit those funds every quarter on your payment schedule that you receive from HMRC. And then you just hold on to the information, and they tell you to hold on to it for at least 6 years. So that's kind of this, the typical option of, hey, I'm going to be compliant and roll with this new law. That's your checklist of what you need to do to make that happen. Moving on to kind of a creative option, and leave this up to our CFO to come up with this option, because he's the money guy, right? If you notice, this new law really only impacts orders under 135 pounds. So a viable option is, maybe I just won't sell to the UK unless the order value is over 135 pounds. You would still need to be able to watch currency exchange rates and determine it. But now, instead of collecting VAT on the ones under 135, you're going to tell your customers, sorry, you can't buy from us unless you order over 135 pounds. Because once it's over 135 pounds, it's no longer your burden. It is now UK Customs burden to collect that VAT. So one thing to keep in mind here is that customer experience. And is it what you want for your customers? I will say this is a very legit option for some merchants, and this would be a very bad option for other merchants. It's not a cure-all for everybody. If you are a merchant that has high value orders, you rarely have an order that is under 135 pounds anyways, this is a great option for you. If you have a lot of low value orders that are under 135 pounds regularly, this would be a terrible experience for you and your UK customers. So just keep that in mind, that is an option you could go with if you don't want to worry about the registration in the UK. This is something to at least consider. This I'm going to talk to you briefly. The orders under 135 pounds going into that's going to affect both B2B and B2C shipments going into the UK, where you have to register and remit on those. There is one opt-out on the B2B side if you are selling low-value B2B orders, which again, low-value B2B orders probably aren't as common. But if you do those regularly, it's possible for you to put the burden of that VAT onto your B2B customers, but you have to collect their VAT information for the paperwork and everything, and then the burden can shift to them to be able to square up with HMRC on the VAT side of things. This isn't very common, and honestly, not necessarily the recommended route unless this is the business you're in, is low value B2B shipments. One thing to keep in mind too is if you are selling a lot of goods and you're registered and you're rocking and rolling in the UK, you might have some businesses in the UK asking you to do this. And if it works for you, fine. But if it doesn't, you don't have to go through this process if you don't want to. If you're already registered and you're already giving your customers their VAT invoices, if they're a B2B customer, they can use that to go reclaim their VAT from HMRC. So you don't have to try to have this exception to your processes to be able to accommodate those B2B customers. They won't like it as much because for the cash flow purposes, they have to pay it up front and then try to get it back later. But it's a viable option for you to just say, hey, you know what, I'll get you a VAT invoice, and then you can use that to go reclaim your VAT from HMRC. So anyways, that's all I really want to touch on that one. And then let's talk about the dirty little devil sitting on all of our shoulders as we read through this stuff and listen to this stuff. What if I just don't worry about it? Are they really going to catch me? I mean, my wife's a fast driver and she gets away with that quite often. But what happens if you ignore the law? Well, the UK has definitely come out and said they're going to enforce it. And this is from them, that states that failure to register and pay VAT in the UK is tax evasion. They're committed to keeping the playing field even between sellers at home and abroad, and has enacted legislation that allows HMRC to hold sellers liable for unpaid VAT. Okay, this is where some teeth really get into this. If you continue to sell into the UK without remitting VAT on low value orders, you will be faced with penalties and fines, and will still be required to pay taxes owed to the UK on all previous items sold. So whether you collected the VAT for those orders from customers or not. This is one of those things where you might be able to get away with this for a little while, but if they catch you, and eventually they will, because in the beginning, I'm sure this transition period is going to be chaotic, and they're going to be going after big fish out there, making sure they're all complying. But eventually they can, if they catch up to you, what happens if they say, we're going to give you penalties and fines for not complying, and you've got to go back and pay the VAT on all of these past orders for the last however many months or years it is, and you haven't been collecting that VAT. That's going to be a very, very, very expensive experience for you. So just comply, use option 1 or 2, come up with something where you feel comfortable and you're not rolling the dice on this, because it could come back to bite you in the future. And then another thing to keep in mind, the UK can also flag you and just start stopping your shipments at the border, and that can turn into a very expensive headache as well. So let's talk in a little more detail about how Zonos can help. And this is really for our Zonos customers, for anyone that thinks they may want to become a Zonos customer. We have a few ways we help with this kind of situation. We've got a number of tools that can help you collect the VAT at checkout, monitor that 135-pound threshold, etc. We can supply the VAT compliant sales invoices to your customers. We can even help with the registration and remittance process if you'd like, or you can do that on your own. That's up to you, but we do have services that can help with that. And then also reporting functionality. So for our Zonos customers, they can go in and see which orders are under 135 pounds and know how much to remit each quarter, and try to make that process as simple as possible. So the way we do this, just to kind of give an overview of our suite of products, landed costs, that's kind of a broad term used. That's duty and tax calculations. We do that for the world. And it can be surfaced to you via directly with API integrations into your own checkout. We also have plugins from most of the major web platforms out there: Shopify, BigCommerce, Salesforce, Magento, you name it. There's a number of integrations we have for that. Another option is the international checkout solution. That's essentially a localized hosted checkout that's translated. They buy in their currency. The whole experience is localized for international shoppers. It also has landed cost integrated into it and can do some messaging around this UK VAT law at the time of checkout, etc. Zonos Hello, that's our messaging tool that when a customer lands on your site, recognizes where they're coming from, can give them pertinent information around duties and taxes into their country. Our quoter tool, that's a way of surfacing landed cost for customers for your offline transactions. If someone's placing an order over the phone or via email and you need to calculate what the VAT's going to be that you need to collect, the quoter is a great tool for that as well. And then we do have Classify, which isn't really in the context of this conversation, but if you need help getting HS codes, etc., that's where we do have services around that as well. So just to break that down a little more, this is really geared for you Zonos customers on the call. Inside of our dashboard right now, those two options that we talked about earlier, you have those two options inside the dashboard, which will impact the experience that your customers have come January 1st. So you have a decision to make here. The first option, will be, I will get registered and I want to start collecting VAT on all of my orders, between 0 and 135 British pounds going into the UK. You select that first option, and then we'll start, come January 1st, we'll start collecting VAT on all of those orders for you. If you decide, hey, I don't want to bother with that, I've got just high value orders, it makes sense for me to not allow the low value orders, you can select the second option. And then keep in mind on this option that your customer's experience will be, may depend on your website integration with us. So if you select that second option, the cool thing is Zonos Hello messaging will be automatically updated to inform them when they land on your site that they have to order over 135 pounds in order to order. The Zonos checkout solution will also have some messaging at checkout if they try to order anything below 135 pounds. Anyone that's on APIs or just the landed cost plugins on some platforms, the messaging at checkout may not be there. They just won't get a quote, may not have a service level. So that might be some things you'll need to work through. But we'll do everything we can to be able to message them with hello and with our checkout solutions. But there may be a few gaps there that you'll need to fill in depending on the integration that you have with us. So that's an integration inside our dashboard that before January 1st, you need to make sure you select one of those options so that way your landed cost calculations are adjusted accordingly. So as far as sales invoices are concerned, if you are set up to collect that, we will, you do have the option to have us send a VAT compliant sales invoice to your customers as well. Obviously, we need an email address for them. You have that setting turned on with us, and we'll send that invoice out to them. As you are selecting the options in the dashboard, when you select the option that you want to collect VAT, there will be a field for your VAT ID. If you don't have that VAT ID yet, leave it blank, because as we talked about earlier, you need that VAT ID number to be on the invoice to be official. So we'll send out something in the interim to let them know your VAT ID is pending if that field's blank. Once you enter your VAT ID in, once you get it back, we will reissue a fully compliant VAT invoice to your customers with your VAT ID on it. It'll all be taken care of automatically. So don't put any dummy data in that blank VAT ID field. Just if you're planning on registering, select that option, leave that field blank. Once you get your VAT ID, go back in and repopulate that field. We'll take care of the rest. So moving on, registration remittance. Like I said before, this is an option. They do ask for a lot of information. If you'd like some help and guidance through that process, reach out. We can help you through it. You're also welcome to get registered in your own way, on your own, or however you want to do that. Just know we have that service we can offer as well. So reach out if you're interested. And part of that services will also help with the guidance through the remittance process every quarter as well. And then reporting inside of our dashboard, we do have, we'll have some great reports for you to easily know what your VAT liability is each quarter. You can see those orders that were under 135 pounds and use that information to easily remit. As just a side note, we do have another value add service. This is really our white glove landed cost service is kind of what I like to coin this. This is where we take on all of this work for you and all this burden for you as far as the collection and remittance. We also guarantee our landed cost calculations to the world and take on the burden of paying those invoices. And so it's an amazing product that can give you peace of mind. If we tell you what to collect at checkout, that gets paid to us. We take care of the rest. No more headaches reconciling duty and tax invoices. We'll monitor the threshold in other places like Australia, New Zealand, Norway, etc. As you breach those thresholds, we'll take care of that process with you as well. And this is really us being a more involved global partner for you in helping you to create a seamless experience, not just for your customers internationally, but also for you. So that way, as a business, someone running a business, you can focus on what you do best. Let us do the dirty work, and you can become the expert in growing your business and not in becoming a duty and tax expert, and we'll take care of that for you. So landed cost guarantee, it is a great solution as well to simplify this whole transition. So feel free to reach out to the Zonos team if you're interested in discussing that in more detail. And then, kind of in conclusion, I just want to say thank you. We've got an amazing team here at Zonos. I love working here. This is a place as a customer I was always very inspired by the concept of what we are trying to do, which is really leverage technology to find creative and simple solutions to cross-border problems that are often very complex. And it's a tough business we're in. It's always changing. There's always something to do, but it's fun and it's worth it. We welcome the challenge. And I'm grateful for all of our customers that are there with us for the journey. And we are committed to continuing the evolution of cross-border e-commerce, and excited to see what the future holds for all of us. So at this point, Clint, I think we'll turn the time over for Q&A. I think we've got about 14 minutes. So if we don't have any questions, we can all get done early, or if we've got some questions, we've got 14 minutes to use up.
Okay, I would say that there were a few questions. I think we've answered like 50. So it's a lot of questions around, are you really going to have to get that VAT number, or possibly use Zonos landed cost guarantee, right, where we can then manage that for you? Are you going to have to collect the VAT on things under 135 pounds? Like, I have a product that, is this type of product subject to it, or it's going to go DDU with UPS Mail Innovations, or with so Aaron, how easy is it to get around this if it's going, are they really going to have to, and are they going to have to, yeah, let's start there. Then I'll ask another question.
Does this kind of come from the, you got to be kidding me kind of mindset? That's probably because that's what I see. That's where I go first with this, right? And then I take a step back and I look at this. Okay, yep, this is legit, and it's worth. This is where it can get a little confusing in the industry, and it's worth really diving into the mechanisms in which HMRC is going to get their money. Basically, everything up to this point has been funneling through customs. So when you start using the INCO terms like DDU, DDP, or terms like free domicile and these other billing service terms that the carriers have, those are all terms that impact what's happening at customs. And so when someone says, when you hear DDU as a merchant, you're often thinking, I'm passing the buck. And it's easy to think, well, I can just keep sending it DDU and I'm going to keep passing the buck to my customers upon delivery, and it's on them to figure it out. That's not the case here anymore. What we're talking about is something completely outside of that customs clearance process, that now HMRC is saying, yeah, we're going to work with customs to monitor what's happening. But we're expecting you, if you want to sell to our citizens and you want to sell orders under 135 pounds, we're expecting you to collect that money and pay that directly to us. And it's the carriers really aren't the ones that are collecting that money and going through that process, upon clearance. This is something directly between HMRC and the merchants. And so, yeah, if you're sending it postal, DDU, or whatever, it doesn't matter. That doesn't change anything according to HMRC. So it's up to you to comply to that.
I kind of look at this like, okay, so back in June of 2018, the Wayfair ruling, South Dakota versus V Wayfair, and everybody here that's selling in the United States anyway is very familiar with the fact that all of a sudden now you now have to remit tax to every state. And, that was a huge issue. And at first, like, am I really going to have to do this? So
that's a great comparison.
And there's so there's some thresholds and things, but that's exactly what happened first in Australia, right? But the reason you haven't had to deal with it is a lot of these smaller retailers have been under the threshold. They don't sell more than 75,000 AUD into Australia. And so this has been happening, but not impacting you. But this is the future of where this is going with other countries as well. And it gets really messy because there's still these de minimis thresholds, right? So, you talked about it, but if you go over 135 pounds, and let's say you're collecting that VAT, what are you going to do if you have an order that's 150 pounds? and you collected the VAT. So Aaron, what would happen if you, okay, so you get a 150-pound order, British pounds. You collect the VAT like you were on the ones that were below 135 pounds. What are you going to have to deal with?
Well, did you send it DDP or DDU?
Well, no, you just collected it. So, what problems are going to occur if you only collect the VAT and it's 135 pounds and you didn't have any type of threshold navigating between the 135 and above, or calculations changes?
Well, for one, your customer is going to pay VAT again upon delivery if you send it DDU. So now they double paid VAT. You're going to have an upset customer. So that's
and then what happens if you send it DDP?
You send it DDP, then the carrier is going to bill you for the taxes along with duties.
Which you probably didn't calculate the duty if it went over 135 pounds. And that's where this gets so messy is you're having to decide now, do I just turn into a company that is going to provide an experience for my shoppers that they can pay all duties and taxes up front? In this case, it's just taxes if it's under 135 pounds. If you go over 135 pounds, there's duty. The best experience for them is no matter what threshold it is, you collect either just the VAT if it's under, or the VAT and duty if it's over. And again, we'll help calculate this. One of the questions was, do we have a plugin that can help manage this? We do. We have plugins on Shopify and the other e-commerce platforms that can help manage this, and that will automatically just calculate these things for you. And like Aaron showed with the APIs, but this is no longer becoming a it's no longer like Aaron was saying earlier with DDU, right? I'm just going to pass the buck. They're not letting you pass the buck anymore. And so now it's like, okay, do I want to create a hodgepodge experience for my customers, or do I want to really dive into my entire international, buying experience and update that for, to be where it's going to go in the future, which is an experience of buying and paying for everything up front and not twice when it arrives, paying a second time.
Couldn't agree more.
Let's see some other questions. Okay, there's a lot, so I need to glance at these because I was talking about Okay, there was let me go to some of these open ones. Okay, can you just repeat, Aaron, how B2B orders are impacted? There was a few questions around this. How are B2B orders impacted differently than B2C?
Okay. B2B orders under 135, I assume is what we're talking about specifically here. There is no difference. You are supposed to collect and remit on those and supply a VAT invoice on both B2B and B2C, but the UK does give one out if you go and collect the necessary information, the VAT ID information. Basically, you're validating that, okay, you're a UK business. I'm going to get your VAT number, and I've got to, go through the proper steps to validate that. Then I can, the burden of VAT can shift to them. But that's really the only out, and then it's got some stipulations around it in order to even use that. Otherwise, just think of B2B and B2C the same. It's you collect the VAT, you give them the sales voice, they use that sales or VAT invoice to take care of the rest inside their country with their own VAT liabilities.
Okay, another question from Sam Moity asked, if a shipper's website has our calculator on there and they're shipping everything DDP, doesn't Zonos collect VAT regardless of the value? And so the receiver won't have to pay anything.
Are we talking today?
Yeah, I think he's talking today, but also I think he's thinking, all right, come January 1, we're going to start collecting the VAT. And you kind of talked about the options that occur that you can choose. Yeah. But logistically, right, there's two options. One is we'll collect the VAT and they'll use their VAT number that they've registered for and they can remit quarterly on. That's one of them. And then the other option is if they're using our landed cost guarantee, they don't have to worry about getting all that registered and everything else. They'll just go and process the shipment in our dashboard. And we make sure that all the paperwork and commercial invoice and everything is filled out right with the VAT number, and we remit for them essentially. And that's probably the easiest options for the ones that are using us today. But it's, it just depends on what that business wants to do.
Yeah, you know what? This probably is worth rewinding back to earlier in the slide deck where we talked about kind of what's happening today, what's happening, at the beginning of the year, and then we also touched on one of the slides of the terms supply VAT and import VAT. So right now, today, supply VAT doesn't exist. That's the new stuff. That's the, hey, collect VAT at the time of supply and remit that to HMRC directly. That doesn't exist today. What's happening today is strictly import VAT and has the thresholds, which we spoke about earlier of, hey, if it's under 15 British pounds, it comes in duty and VAT free. If it's between 15 and 135, it's only VAT, and anything over 135 is both duty and VAT. And that's all determined and collected at the border upon import by UK Customs. Our calculations today are taking all of those rules into effect. If you have an order under 15, we won't collect duty and VAT at checkout. If it's between 15 and 135, we will only collect VAT. If it's over 135, it'll be duty and VAT. Starting in January, we'll be looking at the settings that you have in dashboard. If you select the one that says you're registering, then, or if you're on the landed cost guarantee, then we will collect VAT on everything between 0 and 135. Those will be marked as being low value orders that need to be remitted. And then anything over 135, you can still send DDP and we can still collect duty and VAT for you. The difference will be is now in our system, you'll have, here's the orders that you need to remit on. And then the others will be orders that'll be billed via another mechanism, which will be coming, typically through your carrier if you're sending it DDP. Did that answer the question, Clint?
Yeah, it did. In fact, it answered a second question too, which was someone asked, hey, I just tried this and changed the settings and it didn't change anything. Yes, correct. It's not going to change anything until January 1st. So right. Yeah, you're way ahead of it. There's some questions about how much the landed cost guarantee costs. Kind of depends on probably what you're using with us. We have different products, our checkout, we have a Shopify app. I would recommend contacting our support team if you're a current customer, support@zonos.com to get the details on what that's going to be. But essentially, it's a per dollar amount fee that we just build into the duty and tax calculation. And then what happens is the duties and taxes are billed back to Zonos's account, whether that's with UPS, FedEx, DHL, whoever you're shipping with, we make, or a different carrier such as a Landmark, an ADP, or point to point. There's a bunch of other ones. So the landed cost guarantee, essentially, we just build into the calculation that little fee where we have to take on that risk, and it just gets passed on and paid for by the customer. So you're not actually paying for, in most cases, the landed cost guarantee unless you wanted to. Okay, well, I think we're at the top of the hour, Aaron, and there's been a lot of questions. And so what's the answer for all these people that have a ton of questions here? Who should they be reaching out to? And what are some of the next steps? Oh, that's perfect.
There, I answered it for you. So I think, as far as current customers, reach out to the support team, support@zonos.com. We're happy to field those questions, get the answers for you, and give response in as timely a manner as we possibly can. If you're interested in adding a Zonos product, sales is probably the best place to start there. There's a number of different ways we can solve this, and great solutions to help you kind of navigate this. And if you're interested in, from a partner perspective in finding ways to leverage our solution to help your customers, then partners@zonos.com would be the place to go there.
Okay, I want to answer one more question before we finish. If you're on the landed cost guarantee, this is the question: do you have to register with HMRC?
That's a really good question. There's a mechanism. No, we will handle that for you and actually take on that responsibility for you.
And that's going to save you, about $1,000 in a registration fee, the quarterly remittance costs, which how much close to about $1,000 a year. It depends on who you go to. You can do some of this yourself. So it's just, you will not have to register with HMRC. But there are some things that come along with the landed cost guarantee. You're processing labels in our system where we have full control over making sure everything is perfectly aligned and correct on the export documentation and shipping label, and all the requirements are totally just in line with what they're expecting. But in the end, yeah, we just need to get the money over to Her Majesty. So, well, Aaron, why don't you wrap this up, and we'll.
Well, I think everyone's done talking with me, so I really appreciate everyone jumping on board. I'm glad there's plenty of questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but yes, reach out if your questions didn't get answered. Reach out. We'll get a response, and we're excited. Challenges are challenging, obviously, but they're also exciting too to find ways to tackle them, and we're here to help.
Thanks, Aaron.